"Courage, men," said the captain of the galley. "Here is land at last, praise the gods. We are close in, now row with a will, for right ahead I spy a wooded cove where the water runs deep inshore. There we can moor the ship and feel the good earth under our feet again." The crew answered only with groans, but they bent doggedly to their oars, and soon the black-prowed galley lay alongside a quay of rock in the natural harbor. The captain stepped first ashore. He was a smallish man of about 50, lean as a greyhound, deep-chested, with remarkably broad shoulders and arms on which the muscles stood out like whipcord. Flecks of grey showed in his matted hair and beard, his tanned face was deeply lined, but he moved with the springing gait of youth, and the eyes that peered from between his wrinkled eyelids were bright and hungry as a falcon's. Unkempt, in stained and tattered garments, he had yet the air of one accustomed to command. His crew, some 24 in number, were as gaunt and weather-beaten as he. They stumbled ashore like men half dead with weariness. After drinking thirstily from a stream that ran sparkling down to the cove, they dragged themselves to the nearest shade and fell at once into the deep sleep of exhaustion. And the captain, after some peeping and prying into the thick copsewood around about, lay down and slumbered, or seemed to slumber, like the rest. The sun was rising when that haggard ship's company made their landfall. All day he journeyed through a clear and windless heaven and went down in splendor to his ocean bed. Night followed, mild and starry, and still they slept on. It was high noon of another cloudless day before they began to wake, one after another, and gather by the ship's side. Then arose cries of dismay, for the captain was nowhere to be seen. These rough sailors looked at each other with scared faces, some fell to whimpering like lost children, others muttered, "He has deserted us," and cursed under their breath. "No, no," exclaimed a young seaman. "That he never would, fie on you to say it. He must have gone scouting, to find us food and shelter, as he has done many's the time." Ulpenor, and dear enough we have paid for his scouting," said another sailor bitterly. "Wherever we put in, 'tis the same story. Instead of filling our water kegs, lifting a few sheep or goats, and making off quietly, nothing will serve Odysseus but to go looking for the folk of the place and try what he can wheedle out of them. Folk, indeed. Ghosts, monsters, devils, they are all the folk we have met or are like to meet, in these accursed seas beyond the world's end." "You forget the gentle lotus-eaters," interrupted Ulpenor. "Not I," said the other. "Gentle enough they are and made us welcome to share their food. But why? Because they would have others fall under the same spell that has made them more like wraiths and phantoms than living men. They walk in a daydream, wife, children, homeland, are no more to them than an old song of little meaning. Odysseus did wisely, no doubt, to drag aboard by force our shipmates that tasted the lotus. And yet with a heavy sigh, better have dreamed our lives away on that pleasant shore than perish miserably one by one through his foolhardiness and greed." "Eurylochus," said Ulpenor, "we all know you for a born grumbler, one that will still be talking and is more for talking than doing. Ever the first at a feast and the last at a fray, there's the proverb to fit you, comrade. But keep your long tongue off our captain, for I will not hear him slandered so grossly." "Slandered, say you?" exclaimed Eurylochus. "By all the gods, I speak mere truth of him, and I dare you to deny it. For I have witnesses you cannot gainsay, our poor shipmates that the one-eyed giant killed and devoured in his cave. Who took them there? Who would not come away when they begged him, but must needs wait for that savage, to see if he would give him a present? And so 6 of our best men died horribly, before Odysseus escaped with the rest. He came off safe, mark you. He always does, it is other men's lives he stakes on his desperate throws, the shrewd fellow." "You lie," retorted Ulpenor angrily. "Odysseus ran the same risk as those 6 hapless ones. Nothing but divine providence kept him from suffering the same doom." "Do you tell me that, now?" said Eurylochus, smiling sourly. "Then I warrant divine providence made him anchor his own ship outside the harbor of the Lystrigons, and send the rest of the fleet inside, where the crews were speared to a man by those cannibals." "Doubtless," said Ulpenor gravely, "and, but for that, you and I and our whole ship's company would have been butchered too." That is true enough. We should all have been dead men. Speared in the water like porpoises," chorused the listening crew. And they shuddered, remembering the glimpse they had had of that horror and the hideous roar of savages, mingled with the death shrieks of their comrades, that rang in their ears as they rowed madly out to sea. They had been toiling at the oar ever since, for there was a dead calm, through unknown seas. The only food they had left was black bread and a few onions, there was no more water, but Odysseus had unsealed for them the last jar of the noble wine he had looted from Apollo's priest in Ciconia. And more than the wine, his invincible cheerfulness had kept heart in them until they sighted land once again, and once again could at least feel solid ground under their feet instead of the eternal heaving of the ship. For the moment, that had sufficed. A sort of horror of the great deep possessed these voyagers, so long tossed upon its bosom. It was very heaven to them to be ashore, no matter where. Only let them sleep off their deadly weariness, and the morrow might take thought for the things of itself. But now the morrow was come, and it seemed they must face its unknown trials without the indomitable leader who had won their confidence, though not their love. Only Elpenor, young and warm-hearted, was attached to him. And it was Elpenor who now joyously exclaimed, "What did I tell you, comrades? Look, here comes brave Odysseus with our dinner." Then even the surly Eurylochus could not forbear to cheer as Odysseus came up, bent almost double under the still warm carcass of a huge stag, which was slung around his neck by a rope of green withes tied to its feet. He threw down his load, drew a long breath, and said cheerily, "See, my men, what the good fairies hereabouts have given you. Pitying us poor mariners, they sent this monstrous beast across my path as I went foraging through the woods. My spear did the rest. 'Twas a good throw, though I say it that should not. Right through his spine went the point, and stuck so fast, I could scarce tug it out again. Well, there was he, dead, and there was I, wondering how to bring him away. Dragging him was out of the question, for there are no paths in these woods, I may tell you. However, not to be beaten, I twisted me a rope of green withes, knotted his 4 feet together, and made shift to hoist him onto my back. So now for a meal of good roast meat, that will put fresh life into us. What, comrades, all's not lost yet, you see. Let us eat and drink, and forget care till tomorrow." The hungry crew needed no urging to light fires of driftwood and to flay and cut up the gigantic stag. Soon, a delicious smell of broiling venison gladdened their hearts, and the meal that followed, washed down with good wine, made the most inveterate grumblers ready to swear for the nonce that Odysseus was the best captain that ever sailed the seas. Odysseus had made certain observations, before his lucky encounter with the stag, which he thought best to keep to himself until the next day. He then called a council of the crew and thus addressed them. "Friends all, we must mind what we are about, for I am sorry to tell you we are not out of our troubles yet. For one thing, we have clean lost our bearings, and whereabouts we are there is no knowing. Next, this land we have made is only a small island. Yesterday I climbed a peak that overlooks the whole of it, and saw nothing all around but grey sea, stretching to the horizon. I saw, too, that the isle is all forest, and town or hamlet there is none, only, in one place, a single spire of blue smoke was curling up from among the trees. That smoke comes from a house, and the next thing is to go and see who live there and find out from them what part of the world this is that we have come to." Now the crew no sooner heard that here was no mainland nor town, but a lonely isle with but one dwelling upon it, than they burst into sobs and tears, then cried out that this place would be the death of them, as the countries of the Cyclopes and the Lystrigons had been to their comrades, and all but Elpenor clamored to put to sea forthwith. Odysseus heard them calmly, then he said, "While I am your captain, I will be obeyed. But if you mutiny, take the ship and sail whither you choose, as for me, I will bide here." And at that their hearts failed them for fear, so they grudgingly said they would do his bidding. "That is well," said Odysseus, "now let us divide into 2 companies, one to go on this service, and the other to guard the ship. Come, Eurylochus, you and I will each pick 12 men by turns, you shall lead one company, as I the other, and we 2 will cast lots. The one whose lot comes out first, away he goes." The sides were quickly chosen, then Odysseus put a red pebble, and Eurylochus a white one, into a bronze helmet held by a sailor. It was the white pebble that bounced out first as the man shook the helmet up and down. Thereupon Eurylochus and his company made off into the woods, very loath, and even weeping, and those who remained on the beach with Odysseus had tears in their eyes too, as they watched them depart. The minds of all were oppressed with gloomy forebodings. There was something uncanny about the stillness and silence of this isle, where no birds sang and not a leaf rustled in the dark woods, where even the voice of the sea sank to a whisper. A strange, eager cry broke the stillness. The next moment Eurylochus darted out of the wood, flung himself down on the beach among his astonished comrades, and lay there, shaken with sobs. For a while he could say nothing and seemed as one struck dumb by fear. It was in vain that the sailors plied him with questions. What had happened, and where were the others? Odysseus put them aside, and in quiet, soothing tones bade Eurylochus take courage, for he was safe now and among friends. And this so steadied the man that he sat up and began to tell his tale of his own accord. "Captain," he said, "I and my company went right on through the woods, looking for that house you saw the smoke of, and before long we came to a clearing among the trees, and there, sure enough, stood a great house built of hewn stone, like a king's palace. But, for my part, I smelled sorcery about the place, for, as we approached, a pack of wolves and lions came slinking around us and fawned on us as house dogs do on their master at feeding time. Still, up to the house we went and stood outside the great, shining doors. Gold they were, or of bronze as bright as gold. Then we heard from within the voice of someone singing, and the tune was such as women sing at their weaving, and the voice like a woman's voice, only more heavenly sweet than any woman's. Then one of us, 'twas Polites, that you like best of us all, Polite said, "Be she woman or goddess who sings so sweetly, let us call to her." So we all gave a shout, "Open, you within there," and suddenly the doors were opened wide. A tall woman stood on the threshold smiling. She greeted us very courteously and desired us to go in and drink a cup of wine. And the rest of us went in, glad enough, but I slipped behind a bush and waited there, for my heart misgave me when I looked on that woman's face. She shut those shining doors behind my mates, and I heard her laugh as she did so. With that, I knew for certain they would never come out of those doors alive. I waited and waited, but there was never a sign of them, and not a sound from within the house. And there were those tame beasts crouching around about, watching me with their yellow eyes. At last I could bear the terror no more. And what good was it to stay? Those poor lads walked into a trap, and they are past help, dead already, belike. That is what I must know, said Odysseus, so come on, man, and show me the way to this palace of yours. But Eurylochus fell on his knees and cried imploringly. No, no, Captain, for pity's sake, don't make me go back to that accursed house. I tell you, some evil thing lives there, this isle is haunted by devils, you will never come back if you venture into yonder woods. The captain's thin lips set grimly, and a gleam came into his eyes. Eurylochus, he said, you had better stop here and have your dinner and a drink, which you seem to be in want of. And the others can stay with you to look after the ship. But I am going to see what has become of our comrades. For that, I take it, is my duty. So saying, he fetched from the ship a bow and quiver and a silver-hilted sword which he buckled to his belt, and, without more words, he went off at a round pace into the woods. As Odysseus had said, there were no paths in that forest, but he went straight on, keeping always uphill, for by the smoke he had seen he judged that the house he was making for stood on high ground in the center of the island. He had not gone far when, in an open glade, he saw someone advancing towards him. It was a beautiful, merry-faced lad, who carried a shining, golden wand. Golden also were his sandals and the thongs that tied them to his ankles. "Hail, friend," cried the stranger, and coming up to Odysseus he took him by the hand. "Tell me who I am," he said, smiling. "You are Hermes," answered Odysseus, looking at him reverently, but without fear. "I know you by your wand and sandals, oh, guide of wayfarers. Be good to me now, as you ever are to travelers in need, and show me the house I am seeking." "Odysseus," said the friendly god, "you little know the danger you would run into so rashly. Think you can rescue your comrades out of that house, or from her who dwells there? I tell you no, for she is the witch Circe, the daughter of the sun, who knows all spells and enchantments under heaven. She dwells apart from gods and men in this isle of Aeaea, and all her delight is working mischief to luckless mortals that chance brings here. By her magic she has turned those men of yours into swine, and they lie huddled in a sty, where you will soon join them, unless I help you. But for that I am come, listen well, then, and I will tell you how to deal with the witch. First, you must carry hidden in your breast a certain amulet I will give you. And when you come to Circe's door she will bid you welcome and give you a cup of wine which she has drugged with magic herbs, as she did to your comrades. They no sooner drank than she struck them with her wand, bidding them quit human shape and take that of swine, and thus will she do to you. But drink of her cup without fear, for your amulet will make it harmless. Then, as soon as she lifts her wand, draw your good sword on the witch and make as if to kill her. She will beg for mercy, which you must grant, for only she can undo the spell on your comrades, but beware you trust her not, nor take anything she offers until you have bound her by the great oath of the gods to do you no harm. Beware, I say, lest she weave other spells, that will hold you in vile durance forevermore among those beasts that once were men. And now I will give you the amulet." So saying, Hermes turned his shining eyes on the greensward at their feet and, after a quick glance or two, pointed with his wand to a little milk-white flower, half hidden in the grass. "There it is," he said blithely. "I knew I should find some growing about here. Have you ever seen this flower before, Odysseus, you that are such a great traveler?" "I may have," returned Odysseus dryly, "but if so, I never noticed it. I have had other queer things to look at on my travels than the weeds underfoot." "Also," said Hermes, smiling, "you thought an amulet given by a god would be some precious and rare jewel, not a weed, as you call it. But no, Odysseus, that this small, Humble plant is more precious than ruby or emerald, and far more rare. The deadliest poisons, the most potent philters which ever brewed, cannot hurt him that wears it. But it grows not in all soils, and few there be that find it. Grant me pardon, divine one, said Odysseus, for I spoke as a fool. What is the name of this sovereign plant, I pray you? It is so little known among men, answered Hermes, that they have no name for it, but in the language of the gods it is called moly. I will pluck this same blessed moly, said Odysseus, and he stretched out his hand to the plant. Do not touch it, I charge you, cried Hermes, seizing his arm. Its virtue lies not in the flower but the root, which no mortal may pull up and live. For, being torn from the earth, it gives forth a dying groan, and that sound strikes the hearer dead. But to a god's hand it yields easily and in silence. With that, he stooped down and gently pulled up the plant, root and all, and gave it to Odysseus. The root was jet black and in shape like a forked radish. Odysseus put the amulet carefully inside his tunic, then turned to thank the giver. But Hermes had vanished, suddenly, in the twinkling of an eye, after the manner of the immortals. So Odysseus went on alone to the house of Circe. And this is the place, said Odysseus, glancing warily about him, that so frightened Eurylochus. Well, small blame to him, for the strangeness of it might daunt a braver man. Here is a house for kings to envy, all built of polished marble, and the doors overlaid with fine gold, in the midst of a desert island. And not a living creature anywhere to be seen, except those sleek, fawning beasts that follow one at heel like dogs, as Eurylochus said. Wolves and panthers, that is what you are now, but the gods alone know what you have been. Ah, now I hear Circe singing. But this time she has left the doors ajar, so I'll take a peep at her. And he stole forward on tiptoe. The room he peered into seemed almost dark to his eyes, after the brilliant sunshine outside. But he could presently see it was a stately hall, with marble walls and pillars that gleamed white in the dusk. At the far end, a fire of cedar wood glowed, scenting the air, and near the hearth, with the firelight playing upon it, stood a tall silver loom. And thereon Circe was weaving a great, shimmering web, finer than any mortal handiwork. To and fro she paced as she cast the shuttle, keeping time to her low, sweet song. Her back was turned towards Odysseus, and for a while he stood watching the rhythmic grace of her motions like one entranced. It seemed to him that he could listen to that song and watch that slender, swaying figure forever. But he roused himself and drew back a little and called out, "Ho, within there!" as strangers do at a house door. In an instant, the doors were flung wide, and the witch stood regarding him with a smile. You shall not scare me as you did Eurylochus, thought Odysseus, and he returned her gaze steadily. But his heart beat faster the while, for in all his wanderings he had seen nothing so rich and strange. The daughter of the sun wore a scarlet robe, girded and clasped with great rubies. Her hair, in gloss and tint like burnished copper, was heaped in a silver net studded with yellow pearls. She was pale, save for her lips, which were red as pomegranate flowers, but with a warm, translucent pallor. The eyes she now fixed upon Odysseus were green as emerald, lovely, and malign. Beautiful she was not, but in the grace of her every movement, and in her golden voice, lay a lure more potent than beauty. And now all came to pass that Hermes foretold, for Circe bade Odysseus welcome and let him in, and made him sit in a silver-studded chair with a footstool under his feet. Rest there, stranger, said she, and I will spice some wine for you, for I see you are weary. And Odysseus, covertly watching, saw her pour wine into a golden cup and drop something therein from a small amber box. Then she brought him the cup, and he drank, trusting in Hermes. Instantly Circe snatched up a black wand from a table near and, lightly striking him, cried in a new and terrible voice, Off, swine, to your sty, and herd with your fellows. Brave though Odysseus was and no braver man ever lived, he shuddered at that instant. Erect, rigid, the witch towered over him, her baleful eyes blazing. A hellish energy seemed to radiate from her. If the amulet should fail. But it did not fail, the dreaded change came not, and the next moment he sprang with drawn sword at Circe, murder in his eye. Ah, ah, ah! She screamed, throwing herself at his feet. Who and what are you, that can withstand my spell? And then, clasping his knees, I am your supplicant, kill me not, she said. Ah, stranger, never mortal but you has drunk of yonder cup and kept the form of man. Tell me your name, your country, but methinks I can guess it. Are not you that Odysseus who Hermes of the golden wand has often told me would visit my isle, sailing homeward from Troyland? I am the man, Circe, replied Odysseus sternly, but had I known your fashion of entertaining strangers, your all should never have seen me. Nay, forgive me, great chieftain, said she cajolingly, for how could I know this was you? Come, sheath your sword, and let me make you amends. Then he did sheath his sword, and Circe rose up and, taking him by the hand, she made him sit beside her on an ivory couch spread with rich coverlets. And forthwith she began wooing him to stay with her and be her lover, saying that all the wealth and pleasures of her palace should be his if he would consent. But coldly he answered, Circe, let me hear no more of such talk. How is it possible I should love you, who have transformed my poor crew into swine by your black art, and would serve me the same, for all your pretense of fondness, if I were to trust you? But that I will not. Unless you swear by the great oath of the gods never to harm me. Circe looked at him in silence for a moment, then smiling, You are even wiser, she said, than Hermes told me. But since you will have an oath from me and know the one that alone can bind me, I will swear it. And rising up she spoke these words in a loud, solemn tone, By the water of Styx, dreadful, divine, I swear I will never work evil to Odysseus, son of Laertes, by thought, word, or deed. After that, he was content to let her do what she would with him, knowing that he could only deliver his comrades by winning her favor.
Now you shall see I am a good hostess, said Circe. She clapped her hands, and 4 beautiful damsels came into the hall, laden with all things needful for a banquet. One placed seats, which she spread with purple coverlets, before a table of solid silver, one covered the table with gold dishes full of savory meats. The third brought gold drinking cups and a great silver bowl, which she filled with wine, and the fourth set a bronze cauldron full of water on the fire. Odysseus learned afterward that these handmaids were wood fays, whom Circe had made thralls by her enchantments. When the water boiled in the cauldron, they made ready the bath in a marble-paved bathing room, and Circe herself poured the warm, refreshing shower over him, rubbed him with fragrant oil, and arrayed him in fine linen. Then she led him back to the hall, seated him beside the richly spread table, and bade him eat. But Odysseus could not touch the delicious food, for his soul loathed it as he thought of his wretched comrades, and pictured them grovelling in the sty. He sat silent, with gloomy countenance, tasting neither meat nor drink, until at last Circe said, What ails you, Odysseus, that you sit there like a dumb man and look so woebegone, and will not eat or drink? Are you still expecting some sorcery? Come, put away such fears, they are but cowardly, now I have sworn that mighty oath to you. Ah, Circe, said he, with a deep sigh. What man of any loyalty could bear to feast and make merry, so long as his friends lie in miserable bondage? Nay, first let me see my trusty comrades at liberty again. Come, then, answered the witch and glided swiftly from the hall, wand in hand. Odysseus followed her across a wide courtyard to the door of a sty. She flung it open and drove out the herd, 9-year-old boars they seemed, gaunt and bristly. She waved her wand, and they stood stock-still before her, while she sprinkled each with drops from a vial, muttering mystic words. And then, with trembling, Odysseus saw the bristles fall from their skin, and their shape change like shapes in a dream. They stood up erect. And now they were men, the men he knew. Only, it seemed to him that they were younger, taller, and more comely than before. Is it you, Captain? They cried, crowding around him to grasp his hand and sobbing for joy. Nor could he restrain his tears, and they all wept together, so loudly that the courtyard rang with it. Even Circe's heart was touched for the moment. Noble Odysseus, she said, you and yours have nothing more to fear in this house. So go now and fetch the rest of your crew, that you may all feast and rejoice together. As for your ship, you must haul it ashore, and store your goods and tackle in the sea cave close to your landing place. Odysseus was willing enough and made haste back to the shore, where he found Eurylochus and the rest sitting idle, overcome with misery and despair. Thankful they were to see him, but after the first moments of relief they broke out into bitter lamentations because he had come back alone. What news of our dead? They wailed. Tell us quickly. All in good time, said Odysseus cheerfully, but first let us get the galley ashore and stow our gear in the cave I see yonder, for I am going to take you all to the Lady Circe's palace, where you will find our friends eating and drinking, and thinking themselves lucky to have gone there. Well they may, for they have good cheer in plenty, and everything else that heart can wish. And the rest were overjoyed, but Eurylochus cried out, Don't believe him, you fools. This Circe, if that is her name, has put some trick upon him. Mark my words, she is a witch, and if we go to her, she will turn us all into brute beasts, as she has done with our comrades. How do I know? Because I saw her and saw the creatures she keeps for watchdogs, and I tell you, their eyes were the eyes of men. What, haven't you had warnings enough not to follow the captain on his mad adventures? Have you forgotten the Cyclops' slaughterhouse, I say? You mutinous hound, said Odysseus, his eyes flashing with rage. Though you are a cousin of mine, I am in two minds whether to cut off your head. And he half drew his sword, but the other sailors began pleading, Nay, never mind him, captain. Let him stop here with his fears for company, but the rest of us will follow you to Circe's house. So be it, then, said Odysseus. Then he and the rest of the crew hauled their galley ashore and stored goods and tackle in the cave, while Eurylochus looked on, scowling and silent. But when they set out for the house of Circe, he came slinking after them, for, greatly as he dreaded witches and witchcraft, there was nothing in the world he was so much afraid of as his captain's anger, and now began a pleasant time for these worn and weary mariners. Lodged and fed like princes in the house of Circe, they lived idle and secure, instead of toiling at the oar and encountering continual perils from the savage seas and the yet more savage inhabitants of the coasts they touched upon. By day they could amuse themselves with hunting the deer, which abounded in the island. At nightfall came the banquet, with Circe playing the gracious hostess, and her train of wood fays. She had many besides the four that Odysseus saw at first, deftly serving the guests. And when the meal ended, the men lay reclined, each with a golden wine cup beside him, which those lovely handmaids kept ever brimming. Then Circe would delight them with her singing or with some wonderful tale. Although she sang divinely, they liked the stories best, as is the way with sailors. This she quickly saw, and thereafter told them a new one every night. It seemed that she knew all the stories in the world, tales of the gods, adventures of heroes, and marvels to be seen in far countries. Odysseus, who was himself a great storyteller, professed to have heard many of Circe's tales before, but he listened to them as eagerly as his crew for all that. Sometimes, however, he would begin to fidget a little, then she would say, smiling, Now it is your turn, Odysseus. Let us hear one of your adventures at Troy. And he would tell about the wooden horse, or some stratagem or night raid of his own, which his men had heard 100 times, but they did not mind, for he told it differently every time and always with the greatest liveliness. Even Eurylochus owned that to hear the captain tell a story was like seeing the thing happen with your own eyes, though he would add, Not that I believe half the things did happen that he boasts about. In this manner of life, weeks and months slipped by before the crew began to think of home. Odysseus seemed as contented as they were, not without reason, for the island which grew ever more gracious to him, and all the riches and pleasures of her palace were his to command. She left nothing undone to please him. To all appearance, he was lord of herself and her house. But he soon found that he was not master of one thing, and that was his liberty, for Circe never let him out of her sight. If he wished to go hunting with his comrades, she must be of the party. If he stole out alone, she would suddenly meet him, smiling inscrutably, with those tame wolves and panthers following dog-like at her heels. No words passed between them on the matter. After a while, Odysseus took to staying indoors. His comrades rallied him now and then on his laziness. He answered lightly that he had earned a long rest. A very patient man, he sat day after day in Circe's hall, watching her shuttle go flashing through the loom, and waited. And always, at night, she told her stories. One or two of them are set down in this book, but it would take many books to hold them all, and not half of them have come down to later ages from that far springtime of the world when they were already old.